My name is Constance Page Young. I am a newish member of First Unitarian. I became a member this past winter. I moved to Philadelphia. I tried to move here in August of last year, but I actually wound up moving here in September of last year after a few hiccups. As a point of visual access, I am a tall black woman. I have dreadlocks that go a little bit past my shoulders. I'm wearing a white dress. I have on some black heels, bedazzled blue earrings, and a red lip. Before I get started with my sermon today, I want y'all to know that it's important to me that you all understand that my sermon has some brief mentions of violence. It's super important to me that if y'all feel compelled to leave to take care of yourself, by all means, feel free. I grew up in a small city in South Louisiana, not the New Orleans area, but the Acadiana area, the place where you find Zydeco, Boudin, rural country living, thick, beautiful accents that people in this part of the country often laugh at. South Louisiana experiences a subtropical climate. The air is humid and thick. We have impressive wildlife, lots of exotic birds, alligators, feral pigs. I grew up surrounded by risk takers. Both of my parents came from extremely humble beginnings, growing up in rural black communities. My father was in one of the first integrated medical school classes at Louisiana State University, and that was his first experience with integrated school. My mother never experienced integration as a student, never. But nevertheless, they sent my sisters and I to one of the best schools in the region. It is a predominantly white, upper class, all girls international boarding school. We, however, were day students. At most, I was one of maybe 3 or 4 black students in my grade at any given point. And because my parents took a risk, I had access to a world-class education from the start. My mother was one of the people who taught me how to advocate for myself in a world that would swallow me alive if I did not. My mother learned a thing or two about risk-taking, resilience, and persistence from her own community as a young person. As she was coming of age, her father's church was set on fire multiple times because racists in the community were angry that a black person from that church had started attending a college about 20 miles away. Another example of my mother's stewardship is that one day when my sisters and I were young girls, we were traveling to visit our grandmother who lived in another part of the state. To get there, we had to travel through several small sundown towns. We stopped in one of them because we needed to get gas. My mother pumped the gas, and then she, my 2 sisters, and I went inside to pay. While in the gas station, one of my sisters was accused of stealing. The experience was traumatic for all of us, and my mother did not take this lightly at all. None of her children had ever stolen anything. She wound up hiring an attorney. She sued the store, and she won. I'm sharing with you about my family because context and history matters. Knowing my family's history and the broader history of the Black experience in this country informs why I've taken some of the risks that I've taken. During my teenage years, the Ku Klux Klan had a television program that was broadcasted on public television throughout the region. I knew that these masked Klansmen might be community leaders, and while it certainly scared me, I learned that I had to live with that fear and that I couldn't let it stop me. Not then and not ever. I find it funny sometimes that people refer to me as fearless because that couldn't be any further from the truth. I'm actually scared all the time. I think the only difference is that at my best, I don't let the fear stop me. Fear informs my decisions, but it does not run my life. I have never known a fearless existence. I have always had to be brave, and that is how I learned to take risks. Risk requires the ability to meet whatever shows up. Risk is uncertain. Risk is a requisite for change. Risk invites discomfort and challenges each of us to lean boldly in our values. Risk will look you squarely in the face and ask you, what do you stand for? In August of 2017, I was living in Washington, D.C. I was underemployed, working as an executive assistant, a role that I am particularly unsuited for, y'all, just because of the way that my brain works. I found purpose as a volunteer I found purpose as a volunteer crisis advocate for a local rape crisis center, and I usually answered calls from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. whenever I took shifts. I was the vice president of the Young Souls contingent at a local Unitarian congregation. Donald Trump had been inaugurated about 7 months prior, and fascism had reared its head and was threatening to take hold. At this point in my life, I certainly wouldn't have called myself risk-averse, but I was intentional about the risk that I took because the world that was emerging was not one that I wanted to live in. On the 11th of August, I got in a car and headed towards Charlottesville, Virginia with friends. A storm grew over our heads, an angry thunderstorm, one of the ones that forces you to take notice and respect it. The kind that I loved because it reminded me so much of home. The sky darkened and the heavens opened up. It threw us off of our course as we decided to pull over and wait it out. Little did I know that my experience of this thunderstorm would be a kind of foreshadowing for the next few years of my life. We were on our way to Charlottesville to counter-protest the removal of a Confederate monument. The rally was called Unite the Right. This was set to be the largest gathering of Klansmen, neo-Nazis, and other broken, hate-filled humans in my lifetime. We arrived just as the infamous Tiki Torch March began, and just as it summoned the memories of ritualized terrorism in Black communities, particularly in the South. I didn't get much rest that night. I spent the night in a secluded compound, entrusting my safety in the hands of a couple of German shepherds and a few other very brave people who promised me they'd be up all night and that they would be on the lookout. I slept on the floor in a sleeping bag next to a dear friend of mine and fellow Unitarian. The following morning, tensions were high. Broken and used up tiki torches had been littered about. I had been advised to dress like a soccer mom. I guess I wanted to look as disarming as possible. I wore a pair of jeans, Bass duck boots, a t-shirt, a blue shirt on top of that, and a very thin, long-sleeved black sweater. I purchased that sweater at a time when I lived in Belgium, and it felt very comforting. I knew it would be hot wearing all those layers, but in the event that I had to protect myself or the people who I was with, I wanted to be able to quickly take a layer off in an effort to conceal my identity. To protect my eyes, I wore safety goggles, and I carried an N95 mask with me. This was obviously pre-pandemic. N95s aren't only used to stop the spread of viruses, they'll also help you to keep your respiratory system safe from the effects of tear gas and capsicum spray. I carried a red backpack that I packed the night before. It had first aid supplies, water, and snacks. My goal that day was to go and hold space in a park as part of a permitted action, and that is what I did. I never set out to engage with the participants of Unite the Right. They would be armed and I wouldn't be. In that park, I would meet people who I would later come to love. we would become bonded by our pain. The day was violent and atrocities were committed. Terror was everywhere. Despite all the violence around me, I experienced a level of care and attention from other anti-racists that I found purpose participating in. We looked out for each other, not just our physical safety, but our spiritual safety as well. We tried to tend to all of each other's needs. We quite literally needed each other to survive. Despite having no desire to actually engage the Unite the Right participants, I knew that I'd be taking an enormous risk just by showing up there. Many people believe that white nationalists only lived in the Deep South and they were all old, sad people who would depart this earth soon and take their beliefs with them. But that is not true. They were mostly younger, both male and female. I didn't actually see any women on their side fighting, but their women were playing a key supportive role by helping to look after the injured men and helping them with eye rinses and by supplying water and other provisions. Their men, in fact, did beat our women, and they just shouted that we should have never brought women with us. This may come as a surprise to you, but I was less worried about violence coming from armed and open white nationalists than I was about experiencing police violence. The threat of getting arrested on trumped-up charges and spending all of my time and money fighting a legal battle for the next several months or years never left my mind. Around midday, under the swelter of the summer sun, an unlawful assembly had been announced. The violence had finally become too much, and we were all ordered to leave the area. A strategy that many of us employed that day was to find safety in numbers. So before we could clear out, we marched together through the quaint streets of downtown Charlottesville. These were the highlights of the day. We sang songs and we chanted. I danced. Little did I know that my Constitution was about to be shaken to its core. A man by the name of James Fields Jr. had driven from his home in Ohio to participate in the day's events. He saw us, an emboldened group of anti-racists, singing and chanting, and he drove his car into us. With that act, he not only would become a terrorist, but also a murderer. I will spare you the gory details, in part because I don't remember what exactly happened to me. I must have suffered a head injury because I remember seeing the car barrel down the street and thinking to myself that I was about to get struck, but my brain didn't record much memory, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground. I had tunnel vision, and I could faintly hear what sounded like muffled screams. People were grabbing me, pulling me out of the way as they shouted that he was reversing. These people, who are faceless to me, in my memory, and nameless to me, might have very well saved my life. Risk can go wrong. Risk can go so terribly wrong. And while I got out of this alive, it changed me. I don't regret showing up. And I could have never anticipated the toll that it's taken. It's taken me years to achieve the level of peace that I have now. And surprisingly, this event forced me to change so much in my life. My experience in my body is different. The hugs I give last a quarter of a second longer. I think I'm a more empathetic person now. I understand how fragile our bodies are. I take better care of myself now than I ever have. I suffered a knee injury in that car attack, but I've healed. And I don't consider myself a runner by any means. But this past May, after having trained for just a few months, I competed in the 10-mile Broad Street Run, and that was my first ever distance run. Miles 7 to 9 were particularly challenging, but I kept reminding myself that I actually get to do this. I get to run. I feel like my 12-year-old self, I was forced to run cross country when I was in, I think, middle school or young high school. And I did 2 miles so slow that, that it probably would have been faster walking. But it's so remarkable to me because I really truly felt like I get to run. I set a goal to do the entire Broad Street run in 100 minutes. And I finished it in 100 minutes and 55 seconds, and I'll take that. I was very happy. Um, risk invites us to experience failure, and this is something that I have deeply struggled with. Trauma can force an immediate and erratic reprioritization of everything in one's life. But the rub is that these changes can be subconscious and hard to identify as they are happening. In the years after the car attack, I failed at a lot of things. I couldn't keep up with the demands of my job, and I felt humiliated nearly every day at work because I was making so many mistakes. I felt like everyone was upset with me all the time. I resigned from my job as an executive assistant about 6 months after the car attack. I suffered and had just about all of the classic PTSD symptoms. I had flashbacks, nightmares, memory issues. I was hyper aware of everything. It took years, but I finally came to truly know that my suffering wasn't because I am irreparably damaged, but it is because I'm a human who needed a level of care that I had yet experienced. I kept risking, though, because I needed to see this through. I engaged the media often, and I participated in the attacker's court proceedings in both federal court and in Virginia State Court. That risk I took gave me the opportunity to dedicate years of my life to healing myself, and what I learned is that healing any part of me would be healing all of me. If I wanted a decent quality of life, I would have to re-examine many of the traumas that I experienced in life, even events that happened when I was much, much younger. Risk has helped me deepen my relationships with myself. One of the promises that I made to myself long ago, and perhaps the hardest to keep, yet the most important, was to keep showing up for myself when joy felt unreachable and the pain ran deep. But perhaps the greatest risk I've ever taken was daring to believe that not only would the sun shine again, but that I would once more feel its warmth on my face. I read Langston Hughes' poem, Harlem, where he asks the reader what happens to a dream deferred often. And now I'm risking up here. I don't know if y'all want to hear this. I woke up this morning at about 6 o'clock wondering, should I have chosen a different topic? But what I want y'all to take away from this is that I want you to go into the world and live a life that's led by your values. Lead it with your full chest and commit to personal development and never stop learning. Read about the experience of people who aren't like you. Travel if you can. Take more days off of work if you can. Use your voice. Y'all use your voice to advocate for justice and actively listen to people's stories. We all have a story, each and every one of us. Leverage your failures in a way that encourages self-reflection. My life has been unconventional and sometimes unnecessarily hard, but it has been interesting. And I know that even if I die tonight, I will have lived a life that I respect. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.